A young man finished working and saw an old lady who needed help. He helped her with her groceries, not knowing what would happen next. The next day, he was shocked when the old lady arrived at his door with the police. Derek was happy when his shift at the supermarket ended. Nothing much ever happened there. But one day as he was leaving, he saw an old lady struggling with heavy groceries in the parking lot. Without thinking twice, he offered to help. The old lady gladly accepted his offer, and they shared a smile. Derek helped her put the groceries in her car, ensuring she was okay before they said goodbye. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. Just as Derek was getting ready for the day, the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he was shocked to see the old lady from yesterday standing there, accompanied by 2 police officers. Derek's mind was racing. What were they doing here? Why was the old lady with them? The stern-looking male officer named Martin broke the silence and asked if he was Derek Powell. When Derek nodded to confirm, the officer explained that they were investigating burglaries in the area, the latest victim of which was Miss Vera, the woman beside them. Derek listened with interest but didn't understand why they were here. However, when the female officer named Thompson chimed in, Derek became nervous. As it turned out, all the victims of the burglaries were older people like Vera, and all of them were approached by someone who offered them assistance, after which they were robbed hours later. Derek didn't like where this was going. The police thought the offer for help was a disguise to figure out the victim's address. Derek became increasingly anxious. They were obviously here because they thought he was the culprit, as he had helped the old lady the previous day. Derek tried to remain calm, but then things took an even worse turn because at that moment, Officer Martin asked Vera if Derek was the person who helped her yesterday. After she nodded in confirmation, Derek was swiftly put into handcuffs and taken to the bureau alongside the old lady. As he was escorted to the interrogation room, he looked back. Did she really believe he was the culprit? Derek sat in a small room at the police station for quite a while. Finally, Officer Martin came back. He spoke in straightforward terms, informing him that they were currently searching his house as part of their investigation. The news shocked Derek and made him feel even more helpless. They really thought he did it. Officer Martin questioned Derek sternly about his whereabouts the previous night. Derek admitted he was home alone, feeling increasingly worried. Officer Thompson entered with a grave expression, revealing they found a crowbar in Derek's living room, hinting he was the burglar. With no evidence to prove his innocence, Derek felt hopeless. Under pressure from Officer Martin, Derek considered confessing to escape the situation. However, Officer Thompson's unexpected question about what he did after helping Vera made Derek pause. Her gentle tone calmed him, and he realized he needed evidence to prove his innocence. Despite Martin's intimidating stare, Derek suddenly remembered something significant. I got in my car and was glad to see her arrive home safely. Then I went home and watched TV, he said satisfactorily, unaware of the mistake he made. What do you mean you saw Vera arrive home safely? Officer Martin asked with a direct tone. Derek explained that he noticed Vera driving before him on his way home and parked beside a house. The officers shared a look, and Derek realized he was in trouble as his attempt to prove his innocence had backfired. Then, all of a sudden, Officer Martin stood up. "We're going to hold you at the station while we start processing your case," he said as he placed the handcuffs around Derek's wrists. As the officer escorted Derek out of the room, his head spun and he felt hopeless. But then a voice called out, "Stop!" The voice echoed through the hallway. Derek and both officers halted and turned to see who the voice belonged to. They were surprised to see it belonged to Vera. "What does she want?" Officer Martin mumbled frustratingly. Meanwhile, Derek's heart raced with hope and fear, unsure if her next words would help him. "I've been waiting here to talk to you forever," the old lady said, her voice tinged with frustration. "We will be with you in a moment," Officer Martin said, trying to shake her off. But the old woman was determined and opened her mouth before they could continue. "I think this young man is innocent." The hallway fell silent as everyone processed what Vera had said. Derek felt a flicker of hope ignite within him as he saw the possibility of his innocence being recognized. It was Officer Thompson who broke the silence as she asked the old lady more about it. "Why do you think he's innocent?" Officer Thompson asked. The old woman explained that she had thought things over and remembered seeing a suspicious man in the supermarket the day before. Officer Martin was dismissive, but Officer Thompson insisted on exploring the lead. Derek saw a glimmer of hope as attention shifted away from him. The old woman described how the man kept bumping into her, making excuses each time. After reflecting on it, she felt something wasn't right and wanted to tell the officers. Officer Martin remained skeptical, but Derek saw this as his last chance to prove his innocence. "I could help," Derek offered, eager to clear his name. The officers were surprised, but Derek explained he could get the security footage from the supermarket to identify the suspicious man. Officer Thompson considered it, suggesting that investigating this lead could strengthen their case. Officer Martin seemed doubtful. "Fine," he grumbled. Derek sighed in relief and a slight smile appeared on his face. But the smile was quickly wiped off as Officer Martin told him he would keep a close eye on him. But Derek was determined. He got his chance to prove his innocence. Moments later, they were inside the surveillance room of the supermarket. Derek came along to get them access, and Vera was present to identify the person. The group huddled around the monitor and watched as Derek pulled up the footage from the previous day. A tense silence filled the room, and Derek held his breath. "Come on," Derek whispered under his breath. His eyes were glued to the screen as he hoped the suspicious man would show up. With every passing minute, his hope faded little by little. They were nearing the end of the footage, and Derek started to sweat as his worries increased. But then, everyone was startled by Vera. "That's him," she exclaimed. The officers came closer to look at the figure Vera was pointing at. The footage clearly showed a man awkwardly bumping into Vera. "That doesn't look like an accident," Officer Thompson said. And when the figure turned around, Derek's eyes grew wide. "That's a regular customer," the young man exclaimed. "He's always kind and ready to help." His voice slowly faded as he said it, realizing it couldn't be him. But Derek hadn't noticed that the officers took a real interest in the figure on the screen, and Derek's comment made it even more interesting. The moment the officers saw the man on the screen, they shared the same look as they saw the man fit the culprit's description. "What do you mean by kind and helpful?" Officer Thompson asked. Derek told the officers that he often saw the man helping older people, and as he said it, he felt hopeful. However, the revelation came with a problem. There were now two suspects who matched the unique modus operandi from the burglaries and the description from the victims. But against both, there wasn't any solid evidence. Derek listened to the officers discuss their problems when something crossed his mind. "I think I can help," he said. Derek was desperate to prove his innocence, and this was his chance. He told them that the man they were looking for was a regular and came into the store every day around 6 p.m. He might show up again today, potentially targeting another elderly customer, he said, trying to sound confident. The police officers went out to talk about Derek's idea. Soon, Officer Martin came back and Derek's hopes went down. Even though there was another lead, Derek was still the main person the officers suspected. But then, surprisingly, the officers said they would try Derek's plan. Thompson had told Martin that all the evidence against Derek was not strong enough. She convinced him that Derek's plan could help find proof against the other suspect. Even if they found out Derek wasn't the guilty one, they would still have him. Derek felt a little hopeful, but he knew he still wasn't safe. He understood that if things didn't go well, he would have to go to trial. This day had been full of ups and downs, and Derek realized he had to trust the plan completely. "What are we going to do?" Derek asked. Officer Martin nodded to Officer Thompson to explain their plan. Derek and Vera would stay in the surveillance room and watch the video with Officer Martin. Vera would make sure the man was there, but just seeing him wasn't enough. He had to act suspiciously, like the memo said. If he did, he might be the real thief, and they could move on to the next part of the plan and catch him in the act. Officer Thompson went into the store 30 minutes before the man usually came to keep an eye on things. When it was 6 p.m., Derek, Vera, and Officer Martin watched the screen. Derek's heart raced. The next moments would decide if he was innocent or guilty. Each second made the tension stronger, and then finally, something happened. The man had just entered the store, and Vera confirmed it was him. Officer Martin signaled Officer Thompson that the target was in the store. Derek's heart pounded so hard he was afraid his chest would explode, but all he could do was wait. Officer Martin left the surveillance room to assist Officer Thompson. The two officers followed the man and observed his behavior. He bumped into an older man in the parking lot and helped him grab his stuff off the ground. It seemed normal, but they noticed him sneakily peek inside the man's wallet before returning it. This was more than enough, and Officer Martin returned to the surveillance room to share what had happened, while Officer Thompson stayed outside to observe the situation and ensure the older man wouldn't leave. Derek felt relieved as it was a huge step toward his innocence, but it wasn't over yet. Officer Martin then gestured for Derek and Vera to follow him back to the police car where Officer Thompson was waiting with the elderly man. The officers explained the situation to the older man and asked for his help. Much was at stake for Derek, so when the older man nodded in agreement, his heart leaped. The group headed toward the old man's house. Once there, Officer Martin remained in the car with Derek and Vera for safety. Meanwhile, Officer Thompson accompanied the old man inside his house to be ready to catch the culprit red-handed if he came. And that was the big question for Derek. Would he come? The waiting started. The group didn't know when the bad guy usually did his bad stuff or if he would even show up. The night got darker until finally a shadowy person carefully came near the house. Martin, who was watching closely, quickly told Thompson through their gadget. The tension got stronger in the car, and Derek's heart started beating faster. This was it. As planned, Officer Martin went to help Officer Thompson. A little later, he gave her a signal. Derek and Vera stayed in the car, quietly looking at the house for any signs. Then a light turned on inside, and they saw some movement. After a long time, the officers came out of the house. Derek held his breath as the front door opened and the officers walked out, but they weren't alone. They had caught someone. Derek sighed with relief and whispered, "Thank goodness." He looked at the person they caught. It was indeed the regular customer who everyone thought was nice. Back at the police station, Officer Martin wrote up the official report. Derek and Vera were asked to be important witnesses in the case. Their words were very important in what happened next. Thanks to their help and the great work of the police, the bad guy got caught and put in jail. When the trial ended, Derek felt like a heavy weight was lifted off his shoulders. He could finally move on from this scary adventure. Afterward, he kept in touch with Vera because she helped prove he wasn't guilty, and he was very grateful to her.